Goodwin. I am the chairman of the Otero County Historic Preservation Board. And thank you, Madam Chair and Committee. I'm going to speak to this issue from a direction that you've not heard before, and I suspect maybe from a subject that this committee doesn't normally deal with. In February 2007, Colorado Preservation Inc., which is a statewide nonprofit dedicated to preserving Colorado's historic sites and heritage, placed the Purgatory River region on its list of most endangered sites due to the proposed expansion of the Pinon Canyon Maneuver Site. On June 14th of 2007, the National Trust for Historic Preservation placed the region on America's list of most endangered historic places. In announcing the listing, Richard Moe, president of the National Trust, stated, "Colorado's farms, ranchlands, and historic places are among the state's most valuable assets. The loss of this pristine, scenic open space threatens those who make their living here and those that love this state and its unspoiled natural and cultural resources that make it one of a kind. We must take action to protect Colorado's working landscapes or risk the agricultural, environmental, and economic consequences of a decision that cannot be undone." It is important to understand that neither of these significant listings was limited to the private property of the region. Both of these respected organizations recognize the importance of protecting the private land, the federal land within the Comanche National Grasslands and Picketwire Canyon lands, and the state land within the region. The reasons for this listing is obvious when we consider the number and significance of historic sites in the region. According to a presentation given in August 2007 by the Cultural Resource Management staff for Fort Carson and the PCMS, over 5,100 archaeological and historic sites have been identified on the PCMS. At that time, the Army stated that 491 of those sites were eligible for the National Register of Historic Sites. 3 qualified as traditional cultural properties, and 5 were considered sacred sites. Many of the identified historic sites are located on the 19 sections of land of what had been state land. Currently, an ongoing historic resources survey on private lands surrounding the PCMS have documented over 500 historic sites, most consisting of numerous components. With the number of documented archaeological and historic sites on the current PCMS, including former state lands, and the documented sites on private land surrounding the PCMS, it is certain that there are numerous historic resources on the other state land in the region. What does this mean if state land were allowed to be transferred to the Army? The Army has consistently failed to live up to the legal requirements concerning the management and protection of the cultural and historic resources of the PCMS. The Colorado State Historic Preservation Office has written numerous letters to the Army citing the military's failure to file required reports and to initiate Section 106 consultation as required by law. In response, Colorado SHPO has received either none or only perfunctory responses. Equally disturbing is the fact that numerous sites on the PCMS have been designated as not being eligible for the National Register, while Army documents and staff have stated that they are clearly eligible. The failings of the Army to protect the cultural resources were further documented by a report prepared by members of the Fort Carson PCMS Directorate of Environmental Compliance and Management and given at the 2006 Joint Services Environmental Management Conference. In this presentation, Army staff lists case studies on the PCMS where locations of significant historic sites were reviewed and could not be relocated, while others were clearly visible and had not been documented. The presentation, given by the Army, continues, and I quote, "Ability to manage sites is only as good as location accuracy, i.e. fences protecting nothing." Section 10, subsection 1 of the Colorado Constitution states that the state school lands are an endowment of land assets, held in perpetual intergenerational public trust for the support of public schools. It continues, "The economic productivity of all lands held in public trust is dependent upon sound stewardship, including protecting and enhancing the beauty, natural values, open space, and wildlife habitat thereof for this and future generations." Subsection 2 states that a function of the school lease is long-term agricultural production and community stability. It is clear that the writers of our Constitution believe that state lands were created to provide economic sustainability for our schools and youth. It is also clear that they believe that the protection of these lands were critical to the sustainability of our natural resources and our agricultural production and communities. I would add that sound stewardship of our state lands also requires that we protect our history for the benefit of our youth and future generations. The protection of individual historic assets are not the only things that are at risk. The Purgatory River region represents one of the few remaining large intact working landscapes in the American West. The preservation of a working landscape requires an understanding and respect for the relationship between the natural environment, historic uses of the land, historic sites, culture, the people, and economics. For the working landscape to survive and thrive, the economy of the landscape must be protected. In the early 1980s, the National Park Service recognized the Boxley Valley of Arkansas as a well-preserved example of a rural Ozark Mountain Valley as it had evolved over the past 150 years. Instead of protecting the intact working landscape, the Park Service acquired land in the area and forced the residents to move. In a few years, the agricultural economy of the remaining community was on the verge of collapse, and in 1985, a report recommended that the Park Service sell the land back to the former owners, which was accomplished. The Boxley Valley returned to being an intact agricultural community which was economically viable. The case of the Boxley Valley demonstrates the synergistic relationship between all agricultural lands within the working landscape. Removal of sections of state school land from its historic use in southeast Colorado potentially could have a catastrophic effect on the community and its economy. The cultural and economic black hole in southeast Colorado, which was created by the formation of the PCMS, cannot be allowed to expand. Transfer of state school lands to the military, whether through sale, lease, or exchange, will not meet the requirements as I see them set forth in the Constitution and will not protect the state's natural, historic, or agricultural assets for the benefit of future generations. I respectfully request that this committee support this bill. Thank you.